Okay. All right, so Unit 9, we'll try to pick up the pace a little bit here with Unit 9. And once again, I'm just looking here at the notes, and this was from a Prezi that we used. Unit 9 is all about microeconomics. And microeconomics is how the individual and business relates to the economic system. Now, for us, the economic system that we have in place is called a mixed economy. And a mixed economy is a mix between a command economy where the government controls all aspects of economic decisions, and also a market economy where you have the freedom to create your own business, which is dealing with capitalism. Capitalism is all about controlling the factors of production, and that is capital, the money you need to start your business, the entrepreneur, the person with the idea for the business, labor, the employees that will work at the business, the laborers, and then of course natural resources or land. So we're a mixed economy. The government does regulate the economy as far as safety of products, environmental issues, making sure that companies are not polluting the environment, and that we are using fair business practices, that there's competition, and that ties into free enterprise. Free enterprise is all about competition. What we don't want is monopoly. Monopolies are a sole provider of a good or service. Monopolies can set prices that go beyond what we can afford to pay. Monopolies are illegal. We have the Sherman Antitrust Act and the Clayton Antitrust Act. Their job, those two laws, are to protect the consumer from these types of business practices. So understanding, wants and needs is something that the individual and businesses are going to look at when it comes to things such as supply and demand. And remember, with supply and demand, it's all about the supply side being the producer. They want to produce as much as they can for the highest possible price to sell it at. And as the consumer, we are focusing on demand. We want to be able to buy the best quality and the most of a product at the cheapest possible price, and those two work in opposition with one another. And remember that price goes with demand. So if supply is high, demand's low, we're going to see a drop in price. The producers want to get rid of the supply that they've already manufactured. When it comes to the supply being low, demand being high, then certainly we're going to see that price goes up because people want more of the product. The producer has to make more of the product. They need more money in which to do that. So they're going to work in a sense, supply and demand work in opposite of one another, but demand and price go in the same direction. And when you're going to be a producer, you need to be able to decide, what are you going to produce? Remember, you did your business plan. How should it be produced? How much should be produced? And then, of course, your target group. For whom should it be produced? Those are questions that business leaders must ask, so that when we look at the different types of businesses, a sole proprietorship is a family-owned business or a one-person-owned business. And you have private ownership, which is a positive. You get all the profit, but then certainly you have all the debt. If you're looking at a partnership, 2 or more people, once again, pride of ownership, more ideas flowing because more people involved in the group, in the business, but then again, you share all the debt. Corporations, easier to raise money because you are selling stocks in the business, but then you're double taxed because as a corporation, the government taxes corporations as if they were an individual business or an individual person. So then we have to look at the types of economies that we see in the world. Traditional, the barter system. You trade for what you need. There may or may not be currency in a actual traditional economy. Then we also see with a market economy, we see business doing what they want to do, making their own decisions without government interference. This comes from Adam Smith. Adam Smith believed in laissez-faire economics, hands off. If the government stays out of business, things will work a lot more smoothly. In a command economy, the government makes all the economic decisions. So we're talking about a communist nation. This would be no private ownership of business. It's all government controlled. This would be something that we see Karl Marx, who writes about communism, the Communist Manifesto, he believes is the best economic system. Then we look at a mixed economy. A mixed economy is what you'd find in this country. It's a mix of command and market. Command being government regulations. Market is that we can create our own businesses. We do have that freedom. We do control the factors of production. So we then have to think about, when we look at microeconomics, that it's all about making decisions in the type of business that you want to create. And when we look at creating a business, it goes back to the factors of production. Remember, natural resources, capital, the money you need or the tools you need to start your business, and then of course the labor, paying your employees, training your employees, and then of course you need the person with the idea. That would be you if you're starting the business. So we're talking about the Bill Gates, the Steve Jobs of the world, who had an idea for a business and obviously became very wealthy as a result of starting that business. So the big thing about a business as far as success is productivity. And what we want to make sure is that we are producing products at a high rate and at a cheaper rate so that we can make more of a profit. The way to do that is through things like specialization. It's when a business or a country becomes really good at doing one thing. Then we need to establish division of labor to become more efficient. So think about the assembly line. And of course, technology is a very important factor in productivity. The more technology you can use in your business to make people more efficient, to make things quicker, to make it cheaper, is going to make you more profit. And of course, training your employees, educating them, making them better at what they do. So that, like for instance, a factory worker, if there's a new piece of technology in the factory, you need to train your workers on using that technology. Otherwise, if you just say, hey, do the best you can and learn on the fly, they're not going to be very efficient. They're not going to do as good of a job. It's going to cost you money as a business owner. So remember that the types of businesses, sole proprietorship, we also have the partnerships, and then of course we have the corporations. And we've already mentioned the advantages and disadvantages of those three types of businesses. If you want to become a corporation, you have to get government permission. This comes from the state government. You get a charter. You're going to publicly trade your stocks. That's how you raise your money. And then, of course, you're going to have a board of directors who are going to listen to the stockholders, the people investing in your company, and what's best for the company to make more profit. So, you need to understand that there's different types of competition. And we have nonprofit organizations. Any money they make, they put right back into the business. These are groups that work with helping people. So the American Red Cross would be an example of that. We then have monopolies or monopolistic competition, and this is something that's illegal because a monopoly is going to take away all competition in the marketplace. Then we have something called an oligopoly. This is when you have two companies like Coke and Pepsi who dominate an industry. And it's not really illegal unless they do something called price fixing. Price fixing is in fact illegal. The way we form these types of businesses is through mergers. Mergers are when a company buys up another company that's very similar. So if Coke were to try to buy Pepsi, that would be a merger. If CVS and Walgreens merge, that would be a merger. A conglomerate is when a corporation buys up a lot of different companies, but it's multinational. In other words, they're not just buying American companies, they're buying foreign companies as well. Conglomerates are not necessarily illegal, But certainly by moving American industries to foreign countries, it takes away American job opportunities and also takes away tax revenue for the government, because if they're overseas, these types of businesses that are multinational, their headquarters are not in this country, thus they're not having to pay taxes in this country. So it costs us revenue. And make sure that you remember that we talked about supply and demand. Demand changes as substitutes change, as preferences or taste changes of the consumer, as income changes, changes demand, and also complementary goods. As they change, demand changes as well. Don't really worry about demand curve or demand table or supply curve or supply table. I seriously doubt that you have any of that information that you need to be concerned with your final exam. And when it comes to looking at supply, remember supply is what the producer makes available to the consumer. Demand is what the consumer wants, or necessarily maybe what they need. I really wouldn't be overly concerned with demand curve or supply curve. That's just something that's beyond just what we need to worry about. But you do need to make sure that you remember equilibrium price. This is when supply and demand are perfect. There's not a surplus. There's not a deficit of any sort with the goods that are being produced or bought. Equilibrium price really does not exist. It's a concept. It's not something that really exists in the economic world. Then you need to think about surplus and deficit as something that there are two words that would be words that you need to think about. Surplus is when you have more than what you need economically. A deficit is when you don't have enough of what you need. Realistically, we want a surplus if we can, but that's not always the case. Sometimes deficits do occur. It's not something that we should be overly concerned about, but certainly it's something that does present itself. So, the next thing we need to look at with microeconomics and making sure that we cover all our bases, make sure you understand the concept of price floor. And this is when the government says you cannot lower the price below a certain amount because it takes away competition. You could also use the example of minimum wage as the least that a person should be paid per hour of work. That's what the government sets. A price ceiling is a limitation on the highest amount that you can charge. What we don't want to see is a circumstance such as price gouging, and this is usually in times of crisis. Ways that we can check what's going on in the economy is we can look at the unemployment rate. Ideally, if we can keep unemployment at 5% or below, that's a good thing. When it starts getting into double digits, that's a bad thing, because what we don't want is a depression, or we don't want an extended recession, but that's something we'll talk about with macroeconomics. And just understand that the government, the individual, the business, the banks all play a role in this flow of economics. And it is a flow because money is exchanging hands. So in microeconomics, think small picture, individual and businesses. Up next is Unit 10, which is macroeconomics, and it's the big picture. We're looking at countries, we're looking at industries, corporations, and how they affect the economy. So last up, Unit 10.